In the beginning, there was a beginning, God. There was a cause, an adequate cause. In the beginning, God created the heavens. That's the space-time dimension, the Shemayim in the Hebrew. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So here we have time, space, and matter, all expressed from the beginning, and their cause, spelled with a capital C, identified. Well, let's see if we can take it beyond that. In a recent Days of Praise devotional that I get, and by the way, I recommend that you go online to icr.org, icr.org, and click on that you want their devotional. It doesn't charge anything, but it is a scientific enterprise that every month gives you an actual publication online with scientific articles and daily biblical and scientific articles brought as a devotional. icr.org. In a recent Days of Praise devotional publication by the Institute for Creation Research, Dr. Henry M. Morris called our attention to an awesome truth. He wrote, "The word poem is derived from the Greek word poema." We're not surprised at that. Our word poem is derived from the Greek word poema, used only twice in the New Testament. It refers to two great works of God Himself, and it uses the word poema. So God writes poetry. Isn't that nice? Thus, God is the divine poet who has created two great masterpieces, artistic creations of marvelous intricacy and surpassing beauty. He writes expressively and beautifully. So, the first of these two poems that God has written, the first is the entire physical universe. Romans 1:19 and 20, "For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made," poema, wow, being understood by the things that God has composed, has written, has expressed, even His eternal power and Godhead. So God wrote the poem of the universe, expressing His own energy, power, and composition. His own composition. But what's poem in Spanish? Poema. Sure it is. In this key verse, everything in the universe, animate and inanimate, constitutes a marvelous product of God's creative forethought and inventive skill. Dr. Morris still writing. If a beautiful poem requires a poet to create it, so much more does the complex cosmic poem of the universe demand a great poet of consummate wisdom and infinite power. That is absolutely beautiful. And this is our graphic done by Steve Miller, our own Steve Miller, of this universe with man in the forefront, made in the image of God, and the entire universal background. Astrophysicist John A. O'Keefe of NASA stated, "If the universe had not been made with the most exacting precision," now class, for the next 20 minutes, we're going to see how precise and exacting it had to be. I want to ask you a question. How good was the Creator's aim? I want to ask you another question. If His aim had been slightly off, with all of the refining statements of the universe, expression of His glory, His power, His wisdom, His majesty, if the universe had been off by a given amount, it would have collapsed. Now, let me tell you what I'm talking about. 5 weeks ago, I lectured out in Washington State, Portland. Among the lecturers was a very fine astronomer. He spoke on the Big Bang, And he said, I want to give you evidence that the Big Bang will not work. And I want to show you that the refinement has to be so precise. And I'm going to get into some of those calculations, but I want to give you this to anticipate. He brought to light an incredible system of numbers. He said there is new information published to show that if the mass of the universe were off by 0.20 zeros and a 1. He said if it were off by that much, the universe would collapse. He said this is what our astrophysicists have calculated. So how much mass is that? And he shook all of us in the audience to our boots by telling us that is the number of 10 to the 20th of protons. Now, what on earth does that mean? Then he said, let me tell you what it means. That's how many protons are in a grain of sand. If the universe had had more or less matter the size of a grain of sand, it would have collapsed. That's how well God writes poetry.